Welcome to LabMinutes.com. In this video, we will look at how to configure Cisco ISE to support wireless with Windows machine authentication using PEAP. The concept is very similar to wired 802.1x that we have looked at in the previous video, but in addition, we want to assume that we do not want all AD users to have wireless access, but only if they are a member of a particular AD. Now let's take a look at our lab setup. So here we have a Cisco ISE running version 112 at the IP of 32.102, domain controller at IP.40, a wireless LAN controller at IP.104, and now we will have two AD users. One of them, admin 1, will be part of a user group called wireless user, and we want this particular group or a member of the groups to have wireless access, while the employee 1 would not have wireless access. At the same time, we have a test domain computer that we will use for a wireless login, and we will allow access since it's part of the domain. And also we're going to try to log in using an AD account using an iPhone, and we'll see what happens. Okay, to start our configuration, let's go and take a quick look and make sure our connectivity to Active Directory is still good. So administration, external identity source, and then Active Directory, and we do have a good connections to our domain controller. And now that we have created, just to show you the wireless user group, right here, wireless user, and the member of the group is admin 1. We have not yet add that to ISE, so we need to do so. Here you can see there's no wireless user. You go add, select group from directory, and we know it's going to start with the word wireless. And here we have wireless computer and wireless user. We want to use wireless user. So okay, let's add it. So save config. Okay, now we can start configuring our authentication rule. We're going to use the allow protocol that we previously create, which is LN PEAP TLS. Let me kind of reorder this a little bit, so move that up. And we're going to duplicate below. This time instead of wire, we're going to call the LAN .1x. And we want to make sure the conditions is also, again, this is provided by ISE by default, wireless 802.1x. Same allow protocol, and we also want to use the same identity source sequence, which is AD and then local. Save. Okay, next we are going to create for our authorization policies an authorization condition. So in the policy elements condition, open new tab. Under authorization, you have compound conditions. And since there's a default wireless 802.1x, let me duplicate that and call it LM LAN machine. Again, this is for the machine authentication. You can see the only difference compared to the attributes as being matched for the wired 802.1x is the NAS port type. Instead of Ethernet, it's wireless 802.11. Okay, so similar to wire, we want to make sure that the machine is a member of domain computer group. So for AD, external groups, and domain computer. So submit. Now we're going to duplicate the LAN machine and call it the LAN user. And instead of being a member of, somehow I do not see wireless user in here, so let me go back and check and make sure that was added properly. So again, external identity source, Active Directory, groups. For some reason is not saved, so let's do that one more time. Okay, wireless user. Okay. and save config. Now it should be saved. So in order to kind of refresh that, let's click away and then click back. And here goes our wireless user group. And we also want to make sure that before you allow a user to log in, we need the machine to be authenticated as well. So condition on the result on the machine authentication, it wants to be true, so it's authenticated. Okay, if you recall from our previous video on the wired 802.1x, we need to create a domain downloadable ACL to just allow the user to authenticate against AD. Let me show you real quick right here. Downloadable ACL, and it's called LM AD login, and this is what we allow. Now, when it comes to dealing with an ACL on wireless, is a little different. We no longer use downloadable ACL. Instead, we use what they call name ACL. So the idea is not to push the whole access list to the wireless controller, but just the name. And that's why we need to make sure that on the wireless LAN controller, there's an ACL created with the matching name. So now we're going to jump to the wireless controller and look at what is configured. So here, we have already pre-configured. I thought that we did. There's no ACL configured right now, so we have to step through that. New. And for this, we can call it LM AD login. Apply. Let's go back. Let's enable counter as well. So apply. And then add new rules. So we're going to do something very similar to what we did for the wired. And that would be any protocol. This is for the DSCP. So boot P, let's see if we can find a DCP client to a server. So you can see this can take a little bit of time, but let's step through that anyway. Direction, we want to do inbound, and we want to do permit. Inbound being from a wireless client, inbound into access point. So let's go add new rule. Sequence 2, protocol UDP, and we want to allow DNS. Again, inbound, permit. Okay, add new rules. 3, we want to permit anything going towards a domain controller. So that would be 172.16.32.40. 255. Direction inbound, permit, apply. And now we want to do the outbound, just for source destination. For destination, we're going to put the, let's just say all the private IP of this 172.16, or okay, 00. Directions outbound, this is the return traffic from the access point towards the client, so permit. And at the end, we want to finish it off with deny any. So apply. All right, so let's go back and create one more. That will be for our permit all. That would be LM permit all. And as the name imply, we're going to permit everything. So both directions and permit. Okay, now that we have the access list configured, going back to our ISE, now we can do an authorization profile, and let's add one that called LM DACL, actually LM DACL AD login first. This is for the allowing user to log into AD. And instead of doing DACL like we do for the wired, we're actually going to move down and find our space ACL name. So right here we want to make sure it matches exactly to the name of the ACL that you create on the wireless LAN controller. So LM AD login. Just to double check, LM AD login. Okay, and then submit. We'll add one more for permit all. We'll call it LM DACL permit all. Again, airspace ACL name, LM permit all. Sure there's no typo, LM permit all, LM permit all. Submit. Okay, now let's go and finish off authorization policy. Let's go ahead and duplicate the wired. So duplicate below. Instead of wired machine, we're going to do LAN machine. And point that to the correct condition. So LAN machine. And also update the authorization profile to WLAN AD lock-in. Done. Same thing for the user. Duplicate below. WLAN user. Instead LM wire user, it will be LM WLAN user with LM WLAN permit all. Okay, so that is saved. Now let's make sure we have the wireless LAN controller configured properly. First, I want to verify that the interface is there, and looks like it's not. So let's go add. We want one on VLAN 64. And we want to make sure it's on VLAN 64. Let's do this quickly. IP address 1664. Let's give it 16. 0. Gateways there 16.1. DSP server, let's just point that to ISE. But you don't really need it, but let's do it anyway. Say apply. Now let's look at the WLAN. We have one created called LM internal. So click into that, radio anything, and let's map it to the interface we just created for VLAN 64. Security is WPA2 already with 802.1x. The server is already pointing to ISE for both authentication and accounting. Again, some of this config we already did in the past video on the recommended config of the wireless LAN controller. So AAA override, which is very important, have that checked. We'll make sure that this DSCP address is required. NAC state is radius NAC. So it looks like everything else is good. So we apply. Okay. All right. Looks like everything is in place. Let's go and bring up the authentication page so we can monitor the login activity. All right, so now we're going to hop onto our test PC over here at the main computer. Now we're going to enable wireless, and let's lock out to force the machine authentication. So lock off. You can see it was trying to access the connect to SSID already, but it was failing. So right here, we're at the login page. So let's take a look at what we have. Okay, so we're going to green our success authentication already, and here is the machine name. So we knew that machine authentication has already passed, and the authorization profile that was assigned was the WLAN AD login. You can see it was coming from a WLC1, which is our wireless LAN controller. Okay. Now let's look at the detail real quick. It's just like the previous page, this is the authorization profile coming in as PEAP, and the username was the machine name, and the ACL name that was pushed out or sent to the controller is LMAD login. So hopefully we'll hop into the controller and take a look in a sec. But here, let's finish off looking at this. NAS port is wireless, and it was matching the LM WLAN.1x authentication rule. And the machine was seen to be a part of or member of the main computer, so that's good. These are all handshakes, authentication. You can see the machine pass the authentication to so the state that we are in right now, if we go to the controller and look at the client, here is our test PC. So let's take a look at the information that we have here. This is the username, the VLAN that is on. It says connected to LM internal. Here's additional secure information. This is PEAP, WPA2 AES, and here, right here, the ACL name is AD login. So wireless LAN controller receives the radius attributes, telling it to enforce LMAD login. And then the other stuff is just the regular client statistic. Okay, so now let's go ahead and log in to the domain. So connecting to the network and going back to the monitor. Give it a second to connect, and now we have another green authentication success. And this time the username is the actual name of the user, which is admin1. And the authorization profile is now permit all. Our PC is has even been profiled as a workstation. Okay, so jumping to the PC, let's see if we have internet. And we do, so we know that we have successfully authenticated both machine and user. So the machine have now network access. At the same time, let's see how the output on the controller changed for that particular client. The username has changed from the computer name to the user name. VLAN still the same. For the most part, it's still the same. The only thing that's changed is the ACL that is now a LM permit all. Okay, so that's for the successful authentication. Now let's give our second username a try, which is employee1. Let's go ahead and log off. Now keep in mind that this machine is a domain machine, so it can't successfully authenticate. And instead of, actually, what I want to do is add the user. So I want to call, this time I'm trying to log in with employee1. And employee1 is not a member of wireless user. Go back here, again, machine authentication passed, but this time user authentication did not. And when you click on that, okay, you got deny access here. And the authentication, although authentication succeeded, it failed authorization. And this is because the user or the authorization does not match any of one of our rules, because the user is not part of the wireless user group. Okay, so we now have successfully blocked out, or blocking any users is not part of the group to connect to wireless, although the machine itself authenticated successfully. Okay, the last test that we want to do is trying to connect, and let's say admin1 has a personal iPhone and he's trying to connect that to wireless. So here we have an iPhone, and we're gonna go and connect to wireless. We have to first have to turn on the Wi-Fi. Slide to on. We should see LM internal right here. So we'll click. And immediately we are being prompted for the username and password. So let's say we know that the admin1 should be able to log in. So LabMinutes /admin1, just to be safe, so give the whole domain, and then password. Click join. And being presented with the certificate, since we're not trusting the root certificate, we'll go accept, but I can see we are failing to connect. So let's go back to ISE and see what we have. So ISE, refresh, right here, fail authentication. So LabMinutes admin1. Let's dig into the detail. Authentication fail. Again, it looks like we are failing authorization profile again. And if you scroll down to the bottom, here we see authentication itself succeeded, which means it was a valid user account, but it was failing because I has not been able to confirm previous successful machine authentication. Again, it did not see iPhone has previously authenticated as a machine. It's not really that iPhone can be part of the domain. We'll take a look in the later video on how to deal with, for example, corporate-owned iPhone. But right here, since iPhone hasn't been machine authenticated, ISE is not allowing it on the network, although the user is completely valid AD user. Okay, so that should wraps up our video on Cisco ISE with wireless 802.1x machine authentication with PEAP. Thank you for watching LabMinutes.com. I'll see you guys in the next ISE video.